somebody says, I think Obamacare is a great thing. And I would like to come back and say, no, it's not, it's terrible. But instead I might say, well, what do you like about it? Or what do you think? And somebody might say, well, my mom's dying of cancer, and I'm worried she wouldn't get care. Well, then I sense that maybe she doesn't want to talk about Obamacare. Maybe she just wants to talk about her mom, right? So you can diffuse sometimes these things with just a simple question. And I got to look up where exactly it is in Proverbs, but there's a line about how a gentle word turns away wrath, right? Sometimes a simple question, a simple statement can power someone down a little bit, so they can say, you know what, I'm really just concerned about your mom. And then if they want to talk about Obamacare, saying, you know what, I would love to be in a situation where your mom could get care, but yet this family that I know that now has to pay $20,000 and may not be able to afford it, I want them to get care too. I just think a fair and compassionate solution is where, it's a win-win for everybody. But we get to those points to really kind of get where someone's going by asking questions. But I would like you to read that. Because we're running a little bit short on time, I want to move to pivoting to better ground. This is actually probably the most advanced thing that you can learn. It's on page 3. So let's say you're framing issues in terms of compassion and fairness. Let's say you're using stories to illustrate. Let's say you're showing that you're listening by affirming what they've said. You've asked questions for clarity. You establish common ground by saying, yeah, I understand your concern about the sage grouse, yet I want a solution that doesn't take from the family farm, right? So you've done all those things. My question is, at what point do you sometimes have to just pivot out of something? And I turn back to the Old Testament scriptures. In Proverbs, it says that wisdom lives next to prudence. I'm paraphrasing, obviously. In my mind, I see a house, wisdom lives there, prudence lives next door. What is prudence? Well, if wisdom is the truth and knowing the truth, prudence is sort of when to use it, right? When to say it. And I think that one of my favorite illustrations is if you find out that your friend's about to go into a really bad business deal, or let's say maybe they're about to have an affair, they're about to do something that's going to destroy their life. Do you tell them in private? Or do you walk into a room like this and be like, hey, Hank, the affair, bad. Don't do it. Don't say no. Don't do it, right? It's wise. It's a wise statement.
Just say no.
It's wise, but it's imprudent. You don't do that. You've now destroyed your relationship with this person. You've destroyed their credibility. You've used, the miter saw when you should have used something a little bit more delicate. So pivoting to higher ground, and I say this is kind of like one of the advanced skills, and that sometimes now is not the time to talk about a certain thing, right? I was at a Republican Women's Forum. I'm assuming everyone there is Republican and at least kind of on the same page. And I'm sitting next to somebody who says, you know what, I would never vote for, I think it was for Greg Brophy. He's a really great guy. And I said, well, why is that? She says, well, he's pro-life. I said, okay. She says, I won't vote for pro-life candidates. I said, oh yeah, well, why is that? She said, well, I grew up, my sister had Down syndrome, so I don't vote for pro-life candidates. I can make that connection there. She grew up with a disabled child. It's obviously a very painful thing for her. She now thinks that abortion is the answer to that situation. Now keep in mind, I was pro-life even when I was a Democrat, a liberal Democrat, something that means very, very much to me. Also, I care very much about the disabled and their humanity and their dignity. I could have gotten offended. I could have launched into something on pro-life, something on the dignity and beauty of the life of the disabled. It could have gotten under my skin. Instead, I sensed there was something else at play there. I sensed that this woman was experiencing a lot of pain in her life. I too grew up with a sibling with a disability. And it means that that child gets a lot of attention and you're left there being like, hey, Mom, Dad, I'm over here. I sensed that pain was something that she hadn't worked through. So rather than say, you know what, I've got 3 minutes before the luncheon starts, I bet I can completely convert her over to my pro-life position just by using brilliant words, I thought, you know what, I'm going to pivot in a different direction. And I said to her, I totally know what it's like to disagree with the party on something. I'm against the death penalty, and I respect that other people have other opinions, but I find that I can still be a Republican and still vote for candidates because I'm with them 100% on issues like jobs and taxation and the Constitution and other things, I find I can still vote for Republicans, even though it's pretty likely we may not be together on this one subject. And I just let it lie there. Because my goal, honestly, if we had a long-term friendship and I could work with her, help her work through that pain, help her to see the humanity of the unborn, I would take that. But I'm probably never going to see her again, and I had 3 minutes before the lunch started. So I prudently decided to pivot. And by pivoting, I talked a little bit about what it's like to be different than your party, but still supportive. About 30 minutes later on, she takes the brochure, Greg Brophy brochure off the table and puts it in her purse, and she said, "You're probably right. I'll think about voting for him, or I'll think about voting for Republicans." And I thought, you know what? I diffused the situation. I allowed her kind of an open to be able to support our candidates, regardless of where you're at on the abortion issue. I at least allowed her to make a Republican choice, and I think that was a good choice. So pivoting is just knowing when it's prudent to say, hey, I think I'm going to have this discussion about guns, or I'm going to have this discussion about this or that. Prudence to say, you know what, I'm going to pivot out of this to a different area. Maybe we revisit it later.